text message came at 3:47 in the morning. Chidimma's phone buzzed against the wooden nightstand, pulling her from a dream she couldn't quite remember. She reached for it with sleep-heavy hands, squinting at the bright screen in the darkness of her room. The message was from Obinna. "Eneni, you awake? I need to tell you something. About the forest." She sat up slowly, her heart beginning to pound for reasons she didn't understand. The forest. Everyone in Amaelu knew which forest he meant. There was only one that mattered, only one that people spoke about in whispers when they thought children weren't listening. The one at the edge of town where the old path used to lead to the neighboring village, before the government built the new road. The one where Obinna's older brother, Ikena, had disappeared 3 years ago. Her fingers trembled as she typed back, "What about it?" The response came immediately, as if he'd been waiting, staring at his phone in the dark just like her. "I think I know how to find him. My brother. I think I know how to bring him back." Chidimma threw off her wrapper and sat at the edge of her bed, her feet touching the cold cement floor. Outside her window, Amaelu was silent except for the distant sound of a dog barking and the ever-present chorus of crickets. The moon hung low and full, casting silver light across the compound. She should have said no. She should have told him to go back to sleep, that grief was making him see patterns where there were none, that some things were better left alone. But she had known Obinna since they were children drawing in the red dust with sticks, and she had seen what losing Ikena had done to him. She had watched him fold into himself like paper, becoming quieter and thinner, his laughter disappearing until she could barely remember what it sounded like. "When?" she typed. "Tomorrow. Before sunrise. Meet me at Adi's house. I'm telling Chikwudi too. No one else. Just us four." 4. The number felt significant somehow, though she couldn't say why. She thought of Adi's with her bright gap-toothed smile and her way of finding humor in everything, and Chikwudi with his careful mind that questioned everything twice. They had been inseparable since secondary school, the 4 of them, until Ikena vanished and their group became 3. Chidimma looked at her phone for a long time before she finally replied, "Okay." She didn't sleep after that. She lay in bed watching the ceiling fan turn slowly above her, listening to her mother snoring in the next room, wondering what she'd just agreed to. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the forest, though she'd never been inside it, not really. Just to the edge once, on a dare when she was 12. She remembered how the trees seemed to lean toward each other, creating a darkness that felt thick and alive. She remembered the silence inside, how even the birds seemed afraid to sing there. But most of all, she remembered the stories. Her grandmother had told her, years ago, before the stroke that took her speech. She'd said the forest was old, older than the village, older than memory. She'd said it was hungry, that it didn't just take people, it kept them. That sometimes, on certain nights, you could hear them calling from inside, their voices exactly the same as they were the day they disappeared, never aging, never changing. Always calling, always begging to be found. But if you go looking for them, her grandmother had whispered, her old fingers tight around Chidimma's wrist, you must be prepared to find something else. Something that wears their face but isn't them. Something that wants to come home in their place. Chidimma had been too young to understand then. She'd thought it was just a story, the kind old people told to keep children from wandering too far from home. Now, lying in the dark, she wasn't so sure. The world was still gray with pre-dawn light when Chidimma slipped out of her house. She dressed quietly in old jeans and a dark t-shirt, moving like a ghost through the rooms where her family slept. She'd left a note on the kitchen table. Gone to help Adiz with something. Back soon, knowing her mother wouldn't wake for at least another hour. The streets of Amaelu were empty, the shops still shuttered, the market stalls abandoned. Her footsteps echoed off the compound walls as she walked, and once she thought she heard someone else walking behind her. But when she turned, there was nothing there except shadows and the slowly lightening sky. Adiz's house sat at the far end of the village, where the paved road gave way to red dirt paths. It was a modest building with a rusted zinc roof and walls that needed painting, but there were flowers in pots by the door, hibiscus and bougainvillea, that her mother tended with religious devotion. Chidimma found the others already waiting in the small veranda, speaking in low voices that stopped when they saw her. Obinna looked terrible. His eyes were red-rimmed and wild, his hair uncombed, his shirt wrinkled as if he'd slept in it, or hadn't slept at all. He held a worn notebook in his hands, gripping it so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. "You came," he said, and there was such relief in his voice that Chidimma felt her chest tighten. "Of course I came." She looked at Adiz and Chikwudi. Did he tell you? He told us he's lost his mind, Chakudi said, but there was no anger in it, only worry. Chakudi was the tallest of them, lean and serious, studying to be an engineer. He wore wire-rimmed glasses that he was constantly adjusting, a nervous habit from childhood. He wants us to go into that forest. The one where... I know which forest, Chidimma said quietly. My brother is alive, Obinna said, and his voice cracked on the words. I know everyone thinks he's dead. I know that's what the police think, what my parents think. But he's not. He's in there. And I found a way to reach him. He opened the notebook with shaking hands. The pages were covered in his handwriting, neat at first, then growing more frantic toward the end, words and sentences and diagrams that Chidimma couldn't make sense of in the dim light. I've been researching, Obinna said, talking to people, old people, the ones who remember the stories their parents told. There's a pattern. Every 7 years, on the night of a full moon in the dry season, someone disappears into that forest. Always one person. Always without a trace. Obinna. Adiz started, but he kept talking, the words spilling out faster now. 1983. A woman named Adanma. 1990. A boy named Obiora. 1997. Chinyu Okafor. You remember, Chakudi, she was your aunt's cousin. 2004. A teacher, Emeka something. 2011. A girl visiting from Enugu. Nobody remembers her name. And then, 2018, Chidimma whispered. Ikenna. Obinna nodded, tears streaming down his face now. And next year, 2025. In 5 weeks, there will be another full moon. And someone else will disappear. Unless we stop it. Unless we go in and find them first. The silence that followed was heavy. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crowed, announcing the coming dawn. Adiz wrapped her arms around herself despite the warmth of the morning. But what if the stories are true? She asked softly. What if the forest doesn't give people back? Then I'll stay there, Obinna said simply. I'll trade places with him. I'll give the forest me instead. Don't talk like that, Chidimma said, her voice sharper than she intended. We're not trading anyone. We're not. She stopped, realizing what she'd said. We. As if she'd already decided. Chakudi was staring at the notebook, his analytical mind trying to find the flaw in the pattern, the coincidence that would make it all meaningless. But Chidimma could see the doubt in his eyes. She'd known him too long. He wanted to dismiss it, but he couldn't. Why do you need us? Chakudi finally asked. Why not go alone, or tell your parents, or... Because I tried, Obinna said quietly. Last month, I went to the edge of the forest by myself. I called his name. I walked in maybe 20 meters, following the old path. And he swallowed hard. I found my way back to the edge, exactly where I started, like I'd walked in a circle. But I hadn't. I know I hadn't. The forest turns you around, Adiz said. That's what they say it does. Maybe. Or maybe I need help. Maybe one person alone isn't enough. Obinna looked at each of them in turn. You were his friends too. He loved you. All of you. If anyone can reach him, it's us. Chidimma felt something twist in her stomach. She remembered Ikenna's laugh, loud and infectious. She remembered how he'd taught her to climb the mango tree in his compound, patient and encouraging when she was too scared to reach the top branches. She remembered the last time she'd seen him, the day before he disappeared. He'd been walking toward the forest with a machete and a bag, telling people he was going to clear some bush for his father. He'd waved at her. She'd waved back. She'd never seen him again. If we do this, she heard herself say, we do it together. No one goes off alone. No one stays behind. We all come back, or we don't come back at all. That's a terrible plan, Chakudi said, but he was already nodding. But I'm in. Adiz looked at the sky, where the first hints of gold were touching the clouds. My mother always said I'd follow you people to my death. She tried to smile, but it wavered. I guess we'll find out if she was right. They gathered supplies quickly and quietly. Water bottles, flashlights with fresh batteries, a length of rope that Chakudi insisted on, though he couldn't explain why. Obinna brought the machete his brother had been carrying that day, the blade still sharp despite 3 years in a shed. They left notes for their families, vague messages about going to the next town, about being back by evening. They were all lying. They all knew it. The walk to the forest took 40 minutes. They left Amaelu behind as the sun rose, turning the sky pink and orange, painting the red earth the color of blood. They passed the old church where white missionaries had preached 100 years ago, now abandoned and covered in vines. They passed the palm wine seller's shack, empty this early in the morning. They passed the last compound at the edge of the village, where an old man sat on his veranda watching them with eyes that seemed to know exactly where they were going. He didn't try to stop them. He simply raised one hand in what might have been a wave or a blessing or a warning. Chidinma couldn't tell which, and then they were there. The forest stood before them like a wall of green and shadow, the trees so close together their branches tangled overhead, blocking out the sun. The old path was barely visible now, nearly swallowed by undergrowth and creeping vines. A wooden sign lay rotting on the ground, its paint peeled away, its words long since faded into nothing. The silence hit Chidinma first, complete and total. No birds, no insects, no wind moving through the leaves. Just silence, thick and waiting. "It's exactly how I remember it," Obinna whispered. "Nothing's changed." Chidinma wanted to turn around. Every instinct in her body was screaming at her to leave, to run, to get as far away from this place as possible. But she looked at Obinna's face, at the desperate hope there, and she knew she couldn't abandon him. None of them could. "Stay close," Chikwudi said, tying one end of the rope around his waist and passing it to Adiz. "If we get separated, we follow the rope back." They tied themselves together in a line, Chikwudi, then Adiz, then Chidinma, then Obinna at the rear. The rope felt flimsy in Chidinma's hands, too thin to hold them, too weak to pull them back if something went wrong. But it was all they had. Obinna took the first step onto the path. The forest swallowed the sound of his footstep completely, as if the ground itself was made of something that absorbed noise. One by one, they followed him in. The moment Chidinma crossed the threshold, she felt it, a change in the air, a pressure against her skin, like stepping into water without getting wet. The temperature dropped. The light dimmed. The world outside seemed to simply disappear. She turned to look back, thinking she'd see the edge of the forest, the village beyond. But there was only more forest. Trees in every direction. The path they'd just walked was gone. Did anyone else feel that? Adiz's voice was small, frightened. "Keep moving," Obinna said. "Don't look back." But Chidinma couldn't help it. She kept glancing over her shoulder as they walked deeper, hoping to see the way out, some sign of where they'd come from. There was nothing. Just trees. Just shadows. Just the suffocating silence. They walked for what felt like hours but might have been minutes. Time seemed strange here, elastic and unreliable. The path twisted and turned, sometimes narrowing until branches scraped their arms, sometimes widening into small clearings where the light filtered down in thin, dusty beams. And then Chikwudi stopped. "Wait," he said. "Look." Ahead of them, exactly in the center of the path, was a fallen log. A specific fallen log, covered in a specific pattern of moss and mushrooms. Chidinma stared at it, her mouth going dry. "We passed this before," she said. "No," Obinna said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "We couldn't have. We've been walking straight." "We passed it 10 minutes ago," Chikwudi said, adjusting his glasses with shaking hands. I remember those mushrooms. They're in a line like teeth." They were. White mushrooms arranged in a grinning curve along the log's side. Chidinma remembered thinking how strange they looked, how almost deliberate. And now here they were again. "The rope," Adiz said suddenly. "The rope should." But when they looked down, the rope was just hanging loose between them, its length unchanged. They hadn't walked in a circle. The rope would have pulled tight if they had. They'd walked forward the entire time, never crossing their own path. And yet, "We need to mark the trees," Chikwudi said, his voice taking on that careful, logical tone he used when he was trying not to panic. "We need to know if we're going in circles." Obinna pulled out his brother's machete and carved a deep X into the nearest tree. The white wood beneath the bark seemed to glow in the dim light. They all stared at it for a moment, memorizing its exact location, its exact height. "Let's go," Obinna said, and everyone watched for that mark. "If we see it again." He didn't finish the sentence. They all knew what it would mean. They started walking again, faster now, driven by something that felt like fear but deeper, more primal. Chidinma's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Or maybe that was something else. Maybe that was the sound of the forest itself, breathing. 5 minutes passed. 10. 20. The trees all looked the same. The silence pressed down on them like a physical weight. Chidinma's throat felt tight, her lungs struggling to find enough air. She opened her mouth to suggest they turn back, though turn back to where, she didn't know, when Adiz screamed. It was a short, sharp sound, cut off almost immediately, but it shattered the silence like glass, and for a moment, Chidinma thought she heard the echo of it bounce back from 1,000 different directions. There, Adiz whispered, pointing with a shaking hand. There. On that tree. Do you see it? They all turned to look. There, carved into the trunk at exactly the same height as before, was an X. The same X. That's impossible, Chakudi said. But his voice was hollow. We didn't turn around. We didn't. Look at the others, Obinna said quietly. Chidimma forced herself to look at the surrounding trees. Every single one of them bore an X, fresh cuts, whitewood gleaming. Dozens of them, hundreds of them, all exactly the same. We only marked one tree, she said, and her voice sounded distant even to her own ears, as if someone else was speaking. The forest is showing us something, Obinna said. He was smiling, but it was a terrible smile stretched too tight. It's showing us that it knows we're here, that it's been waiting. A sound broke the silence then, faint and far away, but unmistakable. Someone was calling. Obinna! Obinna, where are you? I can't find my way back. The voice was young and frightened and achingly familiar. It was Ikena's voice. The same voice Chidimma remembered from 3 years ago, unchanged, Unaged, calling from somewhere deep in the trees. Obinna's entire body went rigid. The machete fell from his hands and hit the ground without a sound. That's him, he breathed. That's my brother. He's here. Wait, Chidimma grabbed his arm, holding him back. Wait. Remember what your grandmother said. Remember the stories. What stories? Obinna turned to her, and his eyes were wide and desperate and not quite sane. That's Ikena. That's my brother's voice. I'd know it anywhere. Obinna! The voice called again, and this time it sounded closer. Please. I'm scared. Everything keeps repeating. I can't. The voice broke off into a sob. Obinna tore his arm from Chidimma's grip and started running toward the sound, the rope pulling tight between them. Adiz stumbled forward with a cry. Chakudi tried to hold his ground, but the rope was cutting into his waist, and Obinna was pulling with the strength of someone who had nothing left to lose. Obinna, stop! Chakudi shouted. This is what it wants. This is. But Obinna was already gone, crashing through the undergrowth, following his brother's voice deeper into the forest. They had no choice but to follow, stumbling and gasping, pulled along by the rope like fish on a line. The forest seemed to open before them, the trees parting to create a path that definitely hadn't been there before. Chidimma ran with her heart in her throat, brambles tearing at her clothes, roots reaching up to trip her. She could hear Ikena's voice ahead, always just ahead, calling and crying and begging them to hurry. And then, without warning, they burst into a clearing. It was a perfect circle, maybe 20 meters across, ringed by trees that stood straight and tall like sentries. The ground was covered in soft grass that seemed to glow faintly in the strange, sourceless light. In the center of the clearing stood a single tree, ancient and enormous, its trunk wider than a car, its branches spreading out to create a canopy overhead. And beneath that tree, sitting with his back against the trunk, was Ikena. He looked exactly the same. Exactly. The same bright yellow shirt he'd been wearing the day he disappeared. The same old sneakers. The same silver chain around his neck that his father had given him. He was even holding the bag he'd been carrying, resting on his lap like he'd just sat down to rest a moment. But his eyes were wrong. They were too bright, too aware. They fixed on Obinna with an intensity that made Chidimma's skin crawl. Brother, Ikena said, and his voice was warm and welcoming and filled with joy. You came. I knew you would come. Obinna made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He tried to run forward, but this time it was Chakudi who held him back, stronger than he looked, his hands locked around Obinna's shoulders. Wait, Chakudi said urgently. Look around. Look at the clearing. Chidimma dragged her gaze away from Ikena and looked. There were other things in the clearing. She hadn't noticed them at first, her attention captured by the boy under the tree. But now she saw them, shapes at the edge of the circle, standing perfectly still in the shadows between the trees. They were people, or they had been people. Or they were something shaped like people. 7 of them, standing motionless, watching. And as Chidimma's eyes adjusted to the strange light, she realized with mounting horror that she recognized them. The woman in the faded wrapper, that was Adanma from the stories. The boy in the school uniform, Obiora. The teacher with glasses, Emeka. All the names from Obinna's list. All the people who had disappeared into the forest over the years. All of them standing there. All of them looking exactly as they had the day they vanished. All of them smiling the same smile. Come closer, Ikena said, and his voice had changed slightly, taken on an echo that seemed to come from the tree itself. Come and sit with me. I've been waiting so long, and I have so much to tell you. What is this place? Adiz whispered. What are they? They're waiting, Ikenna said, and now he was looking directly at her, though she hadn't spoken loud enough for him to hear from that distance. Just like I'm waiting. Just like you'll wait, soon. The forest is very patient. The forest has all the time in the world. He stood up slowly, gracefully, and Chidinma saw that his feet weren't quite touching the ground. He was hovering, just slightly, just enough to be wrong. Run, she said. We need to run. Now. But when she turned, the clearing's entrance was gone. There were only trees, solid and impenetrable, forming an unbroken wall all around them. They were trapped. Don't be afraid, Ikenna said, and he was walking toward them now, gliding across the grass. It doesn't hurt. You just have to wait here a while. Wait and watch. Wait and learn. Wait until the forest decides what it wants from you. Wait until... Until what? Obinna's voice was breaking. Ikenna, please. It's me. It's your brother. Don't you remember me? Ikenna stopped moving. For just a moment, something flickered across his face. Confusion, maybe, or pain. His two bright eyes dimmed slightly. I remember, he whispered. And for just that instant, he sounded real. Human. Scared. I remember everything. That's the worst part. I remember, but I can't. His voice dissolved into static, and when he spoke again, it was with that echoing quality, as if multiple voices were layering over each other. The forest only wants one thing, he said. It wants what it's always wanted. Balance. Trade. Equivalent exchange. 7 were taken. 7 must give something back. You came here looking for answers. You came here with questions. Good. The forest loves questions. Questions keep you thinking. Thinking keeps you here. And if you stay long enough, thinking the same thoughts, walking the same paths, asking the same questions. He smiled wider. Eventually, you become part of the answer. The other figures at the edge of the clearing began to move then, stepping forward in perfect synchronization. Their movements were jerky, wrong, like puppets whose strings were being pulled by someone who didn't quite understand how humans moved. Chidinma felt the rope around her waist pull tight as her friends pressed close together, backs to each other, forming a circle within the circle. There has to be a way out, Chikwudi said, his mind racing, trying to find the logic in this nightmare. There's always a way out. If people keep disappearing here, that means the forest has edges. Boundaries. We just need to find them. Ikenna finished. Yes, many have tried, but here's what you haven't realized yet. Here's the secret the forest keeps. He was close now, close enough that Chidinma could see the wrongness in detail. His skin was too smooth. His eyes didn't blink. His chest didn't rise and fall with breath. You're not in the forest, he said softly. The forest is in you. Every step you took going in, you were really taking steps deeper into yourself. Every path that led you back to where you started was showing you the truth. There is no exit because there is no entrance. There is only the choice. The choice you made when you crossed the threshold. The choice to come looking. And everything that happens after. He spread his arms wide, indicating the clearing, the watching figures, the ancient tree. Is just the forest showing you what you already knew. That doesn't make any sense, Obinna said desperately. None of this makes sense, doesn't it? Ikenna tilted his head, and the movement was too fluid, too boneless. You came here because you couldn't let me go. Because you've been walking in circles ever since I disappeared, always coming back to the same thoughts, the same pain, the same questions. Round and round, starting and ending in the same place. Just like the forest. You've been here all along, brother. You just didn't know it yet. And then Chidinma saw it. Saw what had been bothering her since they'd entered the clearing. The thing her mind had been trying to tell her, but she'd been too afraid to acknowledge. The figures at the edge of the clearing. The ones she'd thought were the people who'd disappeared over the years. They weren't facing inward, looking at the group of friends. They were facing outward, looking at the trees. And they were terrified. Those aren't the people who disappeared, she said slowly. Those are. The ones who came looking, Ikenna finished. The friends. The family. The ones who couldn't let go. The ones who walked into the forest with questions and love and hope. His smile grew impossibly wide. The forest is generous. It doesn't just take. It creates. For every person who disappears, it waits. Waits for someone to come looking. And when they do, he gestured to the tree behind him, and Chidinma saw something that made her blood turn to ice in her veins. The tree's bark was moving, writhing, and carved into its surface, barely visible unless you knew to look for them, were thousands upon thousands of names. All of them different. All of them scratched deep into the wood. All of them begging to be found. "It makes room for one more," Ikenna whispered. The clearing began to change. The grass beneath their feet started to glow brighter, and Chidinma felt it pulling at her, sticky and warm, like the clearing wanted to swallow her whole. The rope around her waist was pulling tight, but when she looked down, she saw that it wasn't Chakudi pulling. The rope was moving on its own, coiling like a living thing, tightening slowly. "We need to cut it," Adiz gasped, clawing at the rope around her middle. "We need to." But Chakudi was shaking his head, his face pale with realization. "If we cut the rope, we separate. If we separate, you'll each walk your own path," Ikenna said helpfully. "And every path leads back here. Always here. Forever here. Unless—" He paused, letting the word hang in the air. "Unless what?" Obinna demanded. "What do you want? What does the forest want?" "I told you. Balance. Trade. Someone came in. Someone must leave. But not everyone. Never everyone. The forest keeps what it's owed." Ikenna's eyes fixed on each of them in turn. "One of you can go. One of you can walk back the way you came. The path will open. The trees will let you through. You'll wake up at the edge of the forest with memories that feel like dreams and dreams that feel like memories. You'll go home. You'll try to move on. You'll spend the rest of your life wondering if any of this was real. And the others?" Chidinma forced the words out through numb lips. "The others stay. They wait. They watch. And eventually, someone will come looking for them. And the forest will grow larger." The silence that followed was absolute. Chidinma looked at her friends, truly looked at them, maybe for the first time in years. Adiz with her brave face crumbling, tears streaming down her cheeks. Chakudi with his logical mind trying and failing to find a solution. Obinna with his desperate, haunted eyes fixed on his brother's false face. And she realized something. They'd all been trapped long before they entered the forest. Trapped by loss, by guilt, by the weight of unanswered questions and unmourned grief. They'd been walking in circles for 3 years, always coming back to the same place, the moment Ikenna disappeared. The moment their world stopped making sense. The forest hadn't captured them. It had simply shown them what was already true. "How do we choose?" Adiz asked in a small voice. "How can we possibly?" "You don't," Ikenna said. "The forest chooses, based on a simple criterion." He stepped closer, and the grass beneath him died, turning black and crisp. "Who wants to leave the most? Who's ready to let go?" For pairs of eyes met in the center of their circle, and Chidinma saw the truth written on every face. None of them were ready. None of them could let go. And that, she understood with dawning horror, was exactly what the forest had been counting on. "There's always another option," she heard herself say. Her voice sounded distant, echoing, as if it were coming from very far away. "There's always—" But before she could finish, the ground beneath them opened up. Not literally, not physically, but something shifted, and suddenly they were falling, tumbling through darkness that felt thick and alive, and Chidinma had just enough time to grab onto her friend's hands before. They landed, back in the clearing. But everything was different now. There were 4 figures standing at the edge of the trees. 4 figures she recognized with a shock that stole her breath. Herself, Adiz, Chakudi, Obinna, standing perfectly still, watching, waiting, and in the center of the clearing, beneath the ancient tree, sitting with their backs against the trunk, were themselves again. Chidinma looked down at her own hands, her own body, felt the grass beneath her, felt the rope around her waist. Everything seemed real. Everything seemed solid. But which version was real? The one standing at the edge, watching? Or the one sitting beneath the tree? "What?" Adiz's voice was shaking. "What is happening?" "The forest that repeats," Ikenna said, and his voice was coming from everywhere and nowhere. "I told you. Every path leads back to the same place. Every choice creates another version of yourself, waiting. You're not choosing whether to leave or stay. You've already made that choice. You made it the moment you walked in. Now you're just discovering all the versions of yourself that chose differently." Obinna was staring at the figure that looked like him, standing at the edge of the clearing. "Which one am I?" he whispered. "All of them," Ikenna said. "None of them. Does it matter? Each version is real. Each version is trapped. Each version is free. The forest contains multitudes. How many?" Chakudi's scientific mind was grasping at details, trying to make sense of the impossible. "How many versions are there?" How many times did you think about turning back before you finally walked into the forest? Ikenna asked. How many times did you almost say no? How many futures did you walk away from? How many paths did you refuse? Every single one is here. Every version of you that could have been. The forest collects them all. And as he spoke, more figures appeared at the edge of the clearing. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All of them familiar. All of them different. A Chidinma who had said no to the text message. An Obinna who had never learned about the pattern. An Adiz who had stayed home. A Chikwudi who had gone to the police instead. All of them here. All of them watching. All of them trapped in the choice they'd made or hadn't made. How do we escape? Chidinma demanded. There has to be a way. If this is about choices, then we can choose to. To what? Ikenna's voice was almost gentle now. To leave? But which version of you leaves? And which versions stay? You can't save them all, Chidinma. You can only choose which version of yourself you want to be. She looked at her friends again, saw the same realization dawning on their faces. To leave, they would have to abandon themselves. Abandon every version of themselves that had made different choices, walked different paths, lived different lives. No, Chidinma said, and her voice cut through the supernatural stillness like a blade. No, I reject this. All of it. Ikenna tilted his head, that too fluid movement that made him seem like something wearing a human mask. You can't reject what's already true. You're here. You've always been here. From the moment you couldn't let go. You're right, Chidinma interrupted, and she felt something shift inside her, something breaking free. We couldn't let go. We've been trapped by grief, by guilt, by questions we'll never have answers to. We've been walking in circles for 3 years, always coming back to the same pain. She looked at Obinna, at the desperate hope still flickering in his eyes. But that's not the forest's doing. That's ours. She reached up and touched the scar on her temple, the one she'd gotten the day after Ikenna disappeared, when she'd been so distraught she'd walked into a door frame and needed 3 stitches. The scar she saw every morning in the mirror, the scar that reminded her, every single day, of the moment their world broke. This forest doesn't trap people, she said slowly, understanding flooding through her. It traps the people who come looking. It feeds on love twisted into obsession, on grief that refuses to heal, on people who can't move forward because they're too busy staring backward. Chidinma, what are you saying? Adiz's voice was small, frightened. I'm saying we made ourselves prisoners long before we walked into these trees. Chidinma turned to face each of her friends. Obinna, you stopped living when Ikenna disappeared. You stopped eating properly. You stopped sleeping. You stopped being you because you couldn't accept that he was gone. Tears were streaming down Obinna's face. He's my brother. And he would hate what you've become, Chidinma said, her voice breaking but firm. The Ikenna we knew, the real Ikenna, would hate seeing you destroy yourself like this. Would hate knowing that his disappearance didn't just take him, but took you too. She looked at the thing wearing Ikenna's face. That's not him. That's never been him. That's just the forest showing us what we want to see. What we're desperate to see. But wanting something to be true doesn't make it true. The Ikenna thing's smile faltered for the first time. The 2 bright eyes dimmed slightly. We have to let go, Chidinma said, and the words hurt coming out, like pulling splinters from her heart. Not forget. Never forget. But let go of this desperate clinging to something we can't change. We have to stop asking why, and start accepting what is. She turned to Chikwudi. You know I'm right. Your logical mind knows it. You've known it since we walked in here. Chikwudi adjusted his glasses with shaking hands. The pattern. The 7-year cycle. It was too perfect. Too neat. Real life doesn't work like that. I wanted to believe because believing meant there was still hope. But hope without acceptance is just another kind of trap. No. Obinna was shaking his head violently. No, you're giving up. You're abandoning him. We're choosing to live, Adiz said quietly, and when Chidinma looked at her, she saw tears but also determination. We're choosing to honor his memory by not letting his disappearance destroy us too. That's not abandonment, Obinna. That's survival. The clearing began to shake. Or maybe it was reality itself that was shaking. The duplicate figures at the edges started to flicker, becoming translucent, their faces showing confusion and pain and something that might have been relief. You can't just choose to leave, the Ikenna thing said, but its voice was changing, becoming layered with other voices, older voices, the voices of everyone the forest had ever kept. The forest doesn't work that way. The forest is eternal. The forest is lonely, Chidinma said softly, and suddenly she understood completely. The forest is lonely. It doesn't want to trap people. It wants to keep them. It wants to hold on to the love that brings people looking, because love is the only real thing it ever touches. But love that can't let go isn't love anymore. It's just pain wearing love's face. She knelt down and placed both hands on the glowing grass. It felt warm, alive, desperately alive in a way that broke her heart. "I forgive you," she whispered to the forest, to the ancient tree, to whatever consciousness lived in this impossible place. "I forgive you for taking him. I forgive you for showing us our pain. I forgive you for being what you are. And I forgive myself for not being able to save him." The ground beneath her hands pulsed once, like a heartbeat. "We all do," Chakudi said, kneeling beside her. "We forgive ourselves." "We forgive ourselves," Adiz echoed, joining them. Obinna stood frozen, looking at the thing that wore his brother's face. "I can't," he choked out. "I can't let you go. You're all I have left of him." "No," Chidimma said gently. "You have your memories. You have the 3 years before he disappeared. You have every laugh, every argument, every stupid joke, every moment of brotherhood. Those are real. Those are yours forever. But this," she gestured at the Ikena thing, "this isn't him. This is your grief. And you have to let your grief go, or it will consume you completely." Obinna fell to his knees, sobbing. The sound was raw and broken and utterly human in a way that made the forest itself seem to recoil. "I'm sorry," Obinna gasped. "Ikena, I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I couldn't. Stop apologizing for things you couldn't control," Chidimma said, wrapping her arms around him. "You didn't fail him. You loved him. You still love him. That's enough. That has to be enough." The rope around their waists began to glow. Not with the sickly, sticky light from before, but with something warmer, something that felt like sunrise. The Ikena thing was fading now, becoming translucent like the figures at the clearing's edge. But as it faded, its expression changed. The wrongness left its eyes. For just a moment, just a heartbeat, it looked like the real Ikena, sad but peaceful. "Thank you," it whispered with a voice that might have been real, or might have been what they needed to hear. "Thank you for letting me rest." And then it was gone. The ancient tree shuddered. The names carved into its bark began to fade, centuries of grief and pain and desperate searching slowly dissolving into smooth wood. The duplicate figures at the clearing's edge smiled, genuinely smiled, and one by one, they simply ceased to exist, released from whatever loop had held them. The clearing itself began to shrink. The perfect circle contracted, the supernatural light dimming into normal forest shadows. The oppressive silence broke, and suddenly Chidinma could hear birds singing, insects buzzing, wind moving through leaves. Normal sounds. Real sounds. The sounds of a forest that was just a forest. "Look," Adiz breathed. The trees ahead were parting. Not magically, not supernaturally, but simply, there was a path. A real path. The same path they'd walked in on, now clearly visible, leading back the way they'd come. They stood slowly, helping each other up. The rope was still around their waists, but it felt different now. Not like a binding, but like a connection. A choice they'd made to stay together, not a trap forcing them to. They walked. And this time, the forest let them leave. 6 months later, Chidinma sat on the veranda of Adiz's house, the same veranda where they'd met that terrible dawn 6 months ago. But everything was different now. Obinna was laughing. Actually laughing, his voice loud and genuine as he told a story about something that had happened at the mechanic's shop where he'd finally gotten a job. He'd gained weight, his eyes were clear, and though he still wore Ikena's silver chain around his neck, it was a memorial now, not a desperate talisman. Chakwudi had his engineering textbooks spread out on the table, but he kept getting distracted by the conversation, pushing his glasses up and grinning at Obinna's animated gestures. Adiz was braiding Chidinma's hair, her fingers gentle and sure, humming a song her mother used to sing. They didn't talk about the forest much. Sometimes one of them would mention it, a flash of memory, a dream, a moment of wondering if it had all been real. But they never dwelled. They'd learned that lesson too well. "I saw Ikena's mother yesterday," Obinna said quietly, and the laughter faded into something softer, but not sad. "She's doing better. She started going to that grief support group at the church. She told me she had a dream where Ikena came to say goodbye. Said he looked peaceful." "Maybe he is," Chidinma said. "Maybe they all are. Everyone the forest ever held. Maybe our letting go freed all of them. Or maybe the forest never existed," Chakwudi said, but he was smiling. "Maybe we all had a shared psychological break brought on by collective grief and guilt. Does it matter? Adiz asked. Real or not, we found our way out. That's what counts. Chidinma touched the scar on her temple absently. She'd considered getting it removed, but she'd decided to keep it. Not as a reminder of pain, but as a reminder of the choice she'd made. The choice to live. The choice to let go without letting go of love. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smiled. It was a text from her mother. Coming home for dinner? I made that soup you like. Simple. Normal. Beautiful. Yes, she typed back. I'll be there soon. She looked at her friends, her family really, gathered together in the golden afternoon light. She thought about Ikenna, about the boy he'd been, about the memories they'd always carry. She thought about the forest, about the impossible choice it had offered, about the harder choice they'd made instead. And she felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Peace. You know what? Obinna said suddenly. I think Ikenna would have liked how this turned out. Not the forest part, he added quickly, seeing their expressions. But this. Us. Still together. Still living. Still choosing each other. To choosing life, Chidinma said, raising her water bottle. To choosing life, they echoed, clinking their bottles together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. In the distance, the forest was just a dark line on the horizon, no more threatening than any other forest, no more mysterious than any other collection of trees. Just a forest. Just trees. Just the past. And they had finally learned to look forward instead of back. Some losses cannot be recovered. Some questions cannot be answered. Some pain cannot be fixed, only carried. The forest taught them something crucial. Grief is natural, but obsession is a choice. Love that clings too tightly becomes a prison, not just for the living, but for the dead as well. True love isn't about holding on forever. It's about knowing when to hold close and when to release. It's about honoring memory without being trapped by it. It's about accepting that some doors close, and no amount of desperate searching will open them again. The hardest choice isn't always between good and evil. Sometimes it's between the comfort of familiar pain and the courage to heal. Between the person you've become in your grief and the person you could be if you let yourself move forward. Chidinma and her friends learned that forgiveness, real forgiveness, starts with forgiving yourself. For surviving. For continuing. For living when someone you love cannot. The forest repeats because grief repeats. The same thoughts, the same pain, the same questions, cycling endlessly until you find the strength to break the pattern yourself. They also learned that true friendship isn't about suffering together forever. It's about helping each other find the path out of suffering. About being brave enough to say we have to let go, even when letting go feels like betrayal. In the end, the forest didn't trap them. They trapped themselves. And they freed themselves. Not by finding answers. Not by rescuing the lost. Not by fixing what was broken. But by accepting what they couldn't change, forgiving what they couldn't fix, and choosing, actively choosing, to live with purpose instead of being haunted by the past. Because the dead don't need us to stop living. They need us to live well, to carry their memory with love instead of anguish, to honor them by becoming the fullest version of ourselves we can be. That's the lesson of the forest that repeats. You can walk the same path forever, or you can choose a different way. The forest will show you the loop. But only you can break it. 3 weeks after Chidinma's story ended, in a village 200 kilometers away, a young man named Oluchi received a text message at 3:47 in the morning. It was from his sister who disappeared into a forest 4 years ago. Brother, I'm still here. I'm waiting. The path opens again in 3 days. Please come find me. Please don't let me fade. The forest is hungry again, and this time it's learned something new. Oluchi stared at his phone, his heart pounding. In the distance, if he strained his ears, he could almost hear it. The sound of trees whispering. The sound of his name being called. The sound of the forest that never truly lets go, waiting for someone new to start asking questions. Because some forests don't trap people. They trap the love that comes looking. And love, the forest has learned, is renewable. The cycle continues. If this story made you feel something, fear, sadness, relief, hope, then it did what it was meant to do. Stories about grief and letting go are some of the most important stories we can share, because everyone eventually loses someone. Everyone eventually faces that choice. Do I let the loss consume me, or do I find a way to carry it and still move forward? Like this video if Chidinma's journey resonated with you. If you've ever struggled to let go of something or someone. If you've ever felt trapped by your own grief. Comment below. Have you ever felt stuck in your own forest, repeating the same painful patterns over and over? How did you find your way out? Or are you still searching for the path? Share your story. This community is here to listen, not to judge. Some questions to spark discussion. Which character did you relate to most, and why? Do you think the forest was real, or was it a manifestation of their shared grief? Would you have made the same choice Chidinma made? Have you ever had to let go of someone, or something that felt impossible to release? Share this story with someone who might need to hear it. Someone who's been stuck in their own repeating pattern. Someone who's lost someone, and hasn't yet found the strength to move forward. Sometimes a story can say what we cannot. Subscribe and turn on notifications because next week, we're exploring The House That Remembers Your Sins. A story about a family that moves into their dream home, only to discover the walls whisper their darkest secrets. Every lie, every betrayal, every moment of shame, and the house demands payment. Remember, the forest only has power over you if you keep walking its paths. Choose a different way. Choose life. Choose healing. And if you're struggling, truly struggling with grief or loss, please reach out to someone. A friend, a family member, a counselor, a grief support group. You don't have to walk those dark paths alone. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong. And remember, some doors close so that others can open. The story ends here. But your story continues. Make it a good one, in memory of everyone still searching for someone they've lost. May you find peace. May you find the strength to let go without letting go of love. May you find your way out of whatever forest holds you. This story is fiction, but the lesson is real. Choose life. Always choose life.